Hello, everyone. So, LA agrees to let the homeless people keep Skid Row property, and some in downtown aren't happy. And so, to expound on this whole thing here, we see here in a pivotal legal settlement, the city of Los Angeles has agreed that it won't put a ceiling on the total amount of property that homeless people can keep on Skid Row, but will throw away sofas, refrigerators, and other large items crowding the squalid 50 block area of downtown. So, the agreement released Wednesday and reached after months of closed door negotiation applies only to Skid Row and adjoining streets. It covers an area bounded by 2nd Street on the north, 8th Street on the south, Spring Street on the west, and Alameda Street on the east. Spring and 2nd Street are heavily traveled commercial streets with a high concentration of shops, restaurants, and pedestrian activity. So, under the settlement terms, the city will have the authority to seize and destroy contraband, hazardous materials, or rat infested property that threatens public health and safety, as well as so called bulky items like pallets, refrigerators, couches, other types of furniture. So there's a map to the left that shows the affected areas, homeless property settlement areas where people reside, encampments. So you see in red is basically all of Skid Row. And so it goes on to say, but other possessions seized during arrest or encampment cleanups must be segregated, clearly marked, and stored for 90 days in a Skid Row warehouse. Medication and other critical items must be available to be returned within 24 hours. So the city also agreed to give better notice of upcoming cleanups and to pay plaintiffs 645,000 in attorney fees, legal costs and damages. The settlement will be in effect for 3 years. The case Carol Mitchell versus the city of Los Angeles. It marks a critical flex point in Los Angeles's long struggle to balance homeless people's property rights against the welfare and the quality of life and qualify of life of a whole community. Because the lawsuit filed in 2016 only targeted a specific geographic area of downtown Los Angeles, the settlement sets a different standard than in the rest of the city, where authorities have set a limit on how much property that homeless people can store in the streets to what can fit in a 60-gallon container. So, those are the things that homeless people are allowed to have, whatever can fit in a 60-gallon container. Some civil rights attorneys believe the 60-gallon limit is unconstitutional, and the settlement states that the parties do not waive furniture, or I said furniture because I'm thinking about physically or by eyesight seeing furniture on the street, which I have seen that. So parties do not waive future challenges over enforcement under any law, state, or federal. So the lawsuit, known as the Mitchell case, accused the city of using street cleanups and minor arrests as a pretext to seize and destroy homeless people's property on Skid Row. And I have seen that where I've seen where They've been given ticketed. Homeless people have been given tickets. Um, if they've been asked to leave and they stay too long in one area, they're given a ticket. I've seen that for RV families as well, because they're parked in certain areas that they can no longer really be parked for long periods of time. Um, and then I've also seen people who are in tents that are in really heavily trafficked areas where they clear it out and they give them a warning to get their things and move it. And if they don't move, then they just start clearing it out the city. So there's different things that I've seen along the ways in Los Angeles. So how the agreement will affect Skid Row's sprawling camps is unclear. Okay, so I actually skipped. So it says where there's more than 2,000 people that sleep in tents and lean-tos in the largest concentration of encampment in the country. So, how the agreement will affect Skid Row's sprawling camp is unclear. So, the city has limited storage capacity for homeless people's goods, and it spent $31 million last year on camp cleanups citywide. So, this is where a lot of the money, the city money, is going to as well. And I think people should think about that because what other things could that money also go for? And now that we have so many homeless encampments and so many people that are out on the street, either they're in an RV or they're in a tent or they're lined up under the freeways. I've seen a lot of that. There, there's a lot of cleanup that has to be done. And so that is pretty costly. So it says that it was 31 million last year on the camp cleanups citywide without making an appreciable difference in Skid Row's sordid conditions. So sanitation officials had said at a public hearing that the sofas, refrigerators, and other big items were the biggest worry. And so it is good to know people's right to property is going to be protected, said General Dogon Dogan of the Los Angeles Community Action Network, a Skid Row anti-poverty group and a plaintiff in that particular case. So advocates and civil rights attorney Carol Sobel called the settlement an important first step, but added that what we want most of all is the city to come clean up with a plan that addresses the needs of everyone, including those experiencing homelessness. So, a spokesman for the city, Mike Fuhrer, who negotiated the settlement with lawyers for homeless individuals and advocacy groups, said that it provides the city and the authority and flexibility it needs to address health and safety issues related to homelessness. But Jessica Lau, chief executive of the city or Central City Association, a downtown-based business group that fiercely fought the agreement, said it keeps in place the rules that have made it difficult for the city to clean up Skid Row and address homelessness. So there's back and forth political fight on this issue. Some say that by them allowing people to keep all of those things on the street makes it hard to clean up areas. And others say that they're protecting the rights of the homeless people to keep certain belongings. And so it's back and forth. And I also believe that they're thinking that these lawmakers, in other words, or these people who are part of the city's association for downtown business-based group, probably are looking at it as a situation where if you allow all these items to be on the street, it's hard to keep things clean with all these things on the street. And on top of that, it promotes people to be comfortable that those things can be on the street, and it promotes more homelessness. Because there are no limits on the amount of things that can exist on the sidewalk, it is hard to determine what is someone's belongings and what is trash, said Law, adding that her group's board of directors will consider a possible legal challenge. And so you don't know which is trash and which is their belongings and things that they keep just to have with them. So it's hard for sanitation workers to determine if something's a public health concern, if it's buried under piles of things and stuff. So Nick Previshich, no, I can't pronounce his name, Previshich, who lives in the Spring Street condominium, said that the settlement will simply expand the boundaries of Skid Row. So they feel like that little area that's cornered off, that red area we were looking at earlier, it's just going to expound Skid Row, make it spread because you allow them to keep all of these belongings, and you can't decipher which is trash, which is just things that are their belongings legally. And so it creates problems. So it says, we have rats, and I have seen them coming in and out of the tents, he said, and what's going to happen is a proliferation of really, really serious health problems, which is already an issue right now, which is fleas that carry diseases. And that has been noted that some police officers have been getting sick as well in the Los Angeles area. I believe there was an article that was talking about that specifically, that some officers are getting sick. So Alex Commissar, a spokesman for Mayor Eric Garcetti, Eric Garcetti called the agreement the outcome of several unfortunate options, but added, it's time we break the cycle of litigation that keeps us from helping people in need. And so for decades, the city, and you can see the homeless encampment, a little snippet of it. So this is Skid Row resident who barricades his tent. This year, 2019, against the winter rains. Okay, so these are people that are actively, like right now, living in the Skid Row area. So for decades, the city has been entangled in litigation over camp sweeps and property seizures on Skid Row. So that's been a big political fight. Um, so in April of 2016, the U.S. District Judge asked James Otero or Otero ordered that the city to stop taking and destroying homeless people's possessions on Skid Row unless they threaten health and safety. Later, turned down the city's request to set value and property limits. So, in a series of closed door sessions, Bureau recommended that the LA City Council settle the case. So, downtown business owners and residents packed the city council's chambers, demanding that the city take the case to the trial. And so they argued that Skid Row's squalid encampments hurt homeless people as much as those forced to work, live, and pass by the trash-filled district each day. So a group of recovering addicts said billowing tents help homeless people hide and perpetuate their struggles with alcohol and drug abuse. So in the meantime, the federal court governing the western states, including California, ruled last year that the cities can enforce anti-camping laws when shelter capacity is lacking, meaning there's nowhere else for these people to go. So you can't just kick them off the streets when they have nowhere else to go but be on the street. And you can't just yank up all of their belongings and throw it in the trash because that's their property. And so what the fight is that all of these belongings and all this clutter, to what some people believe it is that it's going to expand Skid Row. Skid Row is only going to grow. Homelessness is only going to be worse, and health and safety issues are at risk for people who are not in these encampments. And then people who are in these encampments, their health and safety is also at risk. And there's lots of rodents and pests and other things that are attracted to all this trash and all these things that are all over cluttering these areas of encampments. And so, in the meantime, the federal court governing the western states, including California, ruled last year that the cities can enforce anti camping laws when shelter capacity is lacking. So, as LA, it is in LA, that's the big deal. So, some of the shelters, they get filled to capacity and you have to be on a wait list. And some shelters are probably overnight. You can't just stay in them, or you have like maybe a certain number of weeks or maybe a certain number days that you can stay in the shelters, and then you're back on the street. I would suppose now, unless you find like some type of housing arrangement. An appeal of the ruling was denied last month, so homeless advocates said that the city was wasting money for enforcement and the property seizures that should go towards housing or bathrooms and showers and washing stations to improve conditions in the street. So in March, the city council in a closed session approved the framework for an agreement but refused to make public the terms, prompting more protests. So what the city may not do is to rewrite its laws behind closed doors under the guise of reaching a settlement. So a lawyer for the Downtown Central City Association wrote the city attorney in April. Last week, the council approved the attorney fees 12-2 vote and sent the settlement to Garcetti, who signed it on Friday. On a Friday, Councilman Jose Huizar and Joe Buscaino, who opposed the settlement, said it would exacerbate Skid Row's degradation. So the settlement establishes a different set of standards that will only perpetuate the public and health crisis that already exists in Skid Row, said Buscaino. So he represents the harbor area. Huizar, whose downtown district includes Skid Row, said the city continues to set policy as a reaction in the individual and ongoing lawsuit rather than agreeing to a comprehensive settlement. So that will move us forward in the proactive path in helping us address our homeless crisis. So one of the four homeless people who filed suit was Michael Escobedo, 60 years, and died of cancer in October. And two of the plaintiffs are now housed and happy to have their own places. Sobel said that, but the lead plaintiff, Carl Mitchell, still lives on Skid Row right now. So seated on the sagging plastic crate in front of the hippie kitchen soup line last week, Mitchell repeated the allegations that he made in the lawsuit. So the LAPD arrested him for illegal possession of a supermarket shopping cart and took two carts full of his belongings, including medication with his high blood pressure, medicine, pills, medication, and mental health condition that he has. And so these are things that he needed, and they were confiscated through LAPD because they felt that he had all these things in this shopping cart and it was junk, of course. And so this is gotten people in an uproar. So he said he was released from LAPD lockup in the early hours of the morning with nothing but a blanket that he found in an abandoned cart. So Mitchell said the lawsuit had stopped had stopped the harassment on Skid Row, but neither the cleanups, litigation, nor the millions of dollars spent on Skid Row programs have gotten him off the streets. So it takes years to get replaced. He said, so Mitchell sleeps on a half-inch thick foam mat sandwiched between two billowing tents. So it's hard to find a place to squeeze in between the tents, he said, and he said that he's grateful for the street cleanups and cooperates when he can by moving his things out of the way of the power washers and hazmat teams. But why do they have to take the people out with the trash? He asked. Wherever you lay your hat is your home. So these are the people who contributed to this article: Gail Holland and David ZAHNISER. And so you can read more about it, or you can reread the article if you want at your leisure. But basically, I thought this was pretty much kind of giving you a clue as to what Skid Row is like in the downtown area in terms of some of the fight that's going on politically with what are they doing about the homeless situation and cleaning up and making things safer, making more shelter for people who don't have shelter. Is there any possible expansion of like homeless shelters for people who need it? And so a lot of the money that they're spending doing the cleanups and removing people and doing all these things is what someone was saying earlier in the article, that it'd be better if they take that money and try to spend it on making, like, some makeshift shelter for those who can't get in the downtown shelters that are filled to capacity. So what are your thoughts and feedback on this? Because it seems like an ongoing battle. Now, the problem with this whole thing, this whole mess, is that I don't know if you've looked at any of my other videos. There's been some things that have been happening more recently, moreover, like people coming from other countries. And if, from what Donald Trump has been saying, he's saying that he's not going to provide them any housing. He's not going to provide them any resources. Basically, it's detention center, and then if they're released from detention center, then they are at the mercy of whomever is there that will volunteer to help. And so some of these people more than likely might end up in these areas. And so that just adds to the homeless problem. And so some of these people are probably more than likely going to be families. They're going to have children. There's going to be some really severe situations that I think are going to get worse over time. And so what are your thoughts on that? Because it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. And I don't believe they're just going to be in the Los Angeles area. There are other areas that are outside of Los Angeles, other cities, that also have the same issues with homelessness. And so I'm sure that they're going through their debacle on what to do about the homeless situation. And so instead of looking at people as if they're an eyesore, what about the circumstances and what to do about the immediate problems that are going on with homelessness? And so that is the issue at hand. You know, creating places, some safe spaces for families and for people who are looking for jobs, people who are looking for a place to stay, some showers, maybe some more soup kitchens, some people who can volunteer their time. But I think a lot of that has been going on. The problem is homelessness has been growing. And so what's been happening in LA is the rents have been really high. They have been increasing. And so some of these people that you see that are out here on these streets, if they're not in hotels and motels and in RVs and staying with relatives or friends and living from place to place, they end up on Skid Row, or they end up in homeless encampments around Los Angeles and neighboring cities. And so this is a growing problem. And on top of that is the pests that hide under the clutter, the rats, the rodents, and the germs that they carry. And some of these people have substance problems. It's not everyone, but there are some situations where some people have such substance abuse problems. And in some of these shelters, they don't allow for people to do that activity. And so that's what keeps some people on the street as well. And so that's the opposing side. Some people say that these people have ways out, but they're not seeking it because they rather be on drugs and addicted to both drugs and alcohol. And that's what keeps them on the street. And so that I have to admit that some of this is what's going on. But however, that isn't everybody's story. So, what do you think about this? Because I don't see it really getting any better. Um, if they create more housing, do you think that will just enable people to kind of give up and figure that, I'll just take my chances in the housing that they create here? I won't have to pay any rent. Somebody's going to put me up. Or it's a stepping stone for those who aren't trying to just stay on the street, that maybe they can get their foot into a nicer dwelling place. They can seek job employment. They can feel more confident that their life is moving forward instead of giving up. So it's a really scary situation, because some of the things that have been happening recently point to these circumstances of what happens to people when they're impoverished, or they're right now they're having a fight about the rent. And it looks like, from what I was reading out of some articles, that Gavin Newsom, I think he was trying to fight for rent stabilization, but that didn't really go off too well, because I think the renters took a hit recently. I believe some of the laws, um, only one bill made it in, and the rest kind of didn't really make it, and they fizzled out. So, and some things are just temporary for a number of years, and then after that it changes. It goes back to the way it was. And so it just seems as though the cost of living is just really expensive in these metropolitan areas. But the problem is there's many problems, but the issue at hand is a lot of people work in the cities. That's where they make their money. That's where they can find the opportunities. But when you price people out of their neighborhoods, and they're not making the income to pay for the places that they live in, it makes it very difficult for people to maintain things month to month. So, with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to any of my videos, but it seems like before it gets any better, it just seems to get more and more worse. Um, I don't really see this getting any better. I feel like it's like sort of like when you're going around in a circle, and you're looking for something, you're looking for answers, but you wind up going around in circles. Thanks for listening.